Get the keys to the kingdom. Get the keys to the kingdom.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. One more time, Shabbat Shalom. Jeremiah 23, let's start at verse 1. We are in a series titled Slippery Ways in the Darkness. And today I want to look at part 2. Stand up with me, y'all. Let's read a couple of verses, a few verses, beginning at verse 1. Jeremiah 23. It says, woe be unto the pastors. Wow. What an awesome verse. What a way to start off a passage. Because you think that you're not supposed to say nothing negative to pastors. You're not supposed to warn pastors. You're not supposed to say woe to a pastor. But Jeremiah didn't have that problem because he was called. He said, woe unto the what? That destroy and scatter who? The sheep of my, it's in the Bible, of my pasture, saith Yahuwah. So we know that the sheep do not belong to the local pastor. I don't care how many times he say them my folk. And in some instances he may even say them my niggas. We have to be very careful of how we talk about the children of the Most High, because the Most High said, these are my sheep of my pasture. Therefore, thus says Yahuwah, Elohim of Yisrael, against the pastors that feed my people. You scattered my flock. That's what he says. And have driven them away and have not visited them. The idea of visiting them is not saying when a person's sick, you went and gave them some aspirins and orange juice. That's not visitation that he's talking about. He's saying you have driven them. If you watch my message from last week, I went really deep on what it meant to be a pastor and be driven out of the pasture. The idea is you've driven them out of the pasture into an area or a danger zone, and you never went to check them and to get them out of the danger zone back into the actual pasture that Yah has provided for them. That's really what he's saying, all right? He says, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doings. I will gather the, talk back, remnant. If you have not done it, highlight this. It's important. He says, I will gather the remnant of my flock out of how many countries? No, just out of Russia. No, just out of Germany. No, he says all of the countries, whether I have driven them. Therefore, we know, based on this text, that when the great gathering of the children of Israel takes place, they will be coming from all of the countries where he has driven them, which is all over the world, and I'll deal with that in a moment, and will bring them again unto where? Therefore, which is the holy promised land. Not just one city, but the whole promised land. And they shall be, talk back, fruitful and what? And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them. In other words, in the last days, Yah will have shepherds. This needs to go out worldwide. Just because there's some bad shepherds does not mean that Yah has abandoned using shepherds. Because that's going out in a weird way, especially among Hebrew Israelites and Hebrew roots people who say they don't want to be a part of no church, they don't want to be a part of no congregation, they're just going to do it alone, and they don't need a shepherd because they were in church at one time and the pastors were off, so they've decided not to have no more pastor, not to have no more church. Listen, the truth of Yah's word is Yah's system works when the people are obedient. So what he's not throwing out the system of having a pastor and a shepherd. What he's saying is, I'm just going to have to call me some new ones who are going to do it right. All right, y'all stay with me just real quick. I'm almost done. Watch this. And he says, and they shall fear no more. I dealt with that a lot last week. Neither be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith Yah. Behold, verse 5, The days come, saith Yah, that I will raise unto who? A what? And a what? Shall do what? And a king shall reign and prosper and execute judgment and justice in the earth. And in his days Judah shall be taught back. So we know that there's a time when the Hamashiach is coming, that Judah will be saved and Israel will what? Dwell safely. Two houses, don't forget that. Judah and Israel had split. But Yah has a plan to bring them back together. That's beautiful. And this is the name whereby he shall be called. Yahuwah, our righteousness. Amen. Today really I want to talk about the righteous branch. You may be seated. Still dealing with this idea of slippery ways in the darkness. The prophet Jeremiah, in speaking about the doom, really the gloom and doom of the children of Israel, he speaks of their terrible state. He says that they have forsaken Yah. He said they've gone out and done their own thing, and as a result of following after Baal, which is the same little god that the churches and other people are following today, that's Christmas and all of that kind, everything connected to it. And Ashtaroth, which is the word that we have the word today, Easter, same person. Those two gods were powerful deities that pulled the people's mind and heart away from Yahuwah. One of the reasons is because they believed that if they followed Baal and Ashtaroth, they no longer had to keep the laws and the commandments and the statutes of Yahuwah. And what they told Jeremiah was, man, that's Old Testament. Now y'all say, how could they say that's Old Testament in the Old Testament? Because every generation said the same thing. Man, that's Moses' day. This is a new day now. We ain't gonna be walking according to the ways of our ancestors that was down in the desert. We live in cities now. We're not walking through the wilderness. We're already in the promised land. And now that we're in the promised land, what we have chosen is to change gods. We've chosen to follow the gods of the Canaanites. So anything that the Canaanites do, we're going to do. Now watch this. And anything that Yah tells us to do, we're just not going to do it. Does that sound familiar? We will keep a pagan festival today and say we're doing it in the name of Yah. But then we will ignore Yah's days. I'll give you a very simple one. Remember the Shabbat. Keep it holy. I mean, you can't get no more basic than that. 6 days work. Do all your labor. But on that 7th day, that's Yah's day. But what we've done is changed it. Because the world wanted Sunday, we went with Sunday. Do y'all get it? In other words, all I'm trying to lay down is a very interesting principle. Is that there's always been the tendency among the children of Israel to follow the nations around them and to forsake the Elohim of their forefathers, Yahuwah. All right? So what ends up happening is, if you break the Torah according to Deuteronomy, well, according to the first 5 books, but according to the laws given to Moshe, he says, if you keep them, I'll make you the head and not the tail. You will be prosperous in all of your dealings. Your store and your house will be full. Your children will be prosperous. And there's a lot of things he mentions in Deuteronomy chapter 28. But when you get to Deuteronomy chapter 28, past verse 15, he says, these things will come upon you if you disobey me. You will not be the head, but you'll be the tail. And nations will be able to rule over you, and the strangers will get high above you. And he goes on and on. You will get married, but never really get a chance to enjoy your wife. Your children will be taken from you. You'll be sold into captivity. And there's more and more and more things in Deuteronomy chapter 28. But I don't want to stay there. I just want you to see something. When Jeremiah gets on the scene, he sees that the people, the children of Israel, have committed the very sins that they were told not to commit. And as a result, the 10 tribes in the north were already scattered, gone. And Jeremiah could see that the judgment of Judah and Benjamin, which was the baby boys, the small tribe in the south, he saw that their behavior was going against Torah, and the same thing was about to happen to them. And he pointed out the problem. And here's a problem that I know that I'm having today amongst, especially amongst clergy, because they don't want me to really say this, but I need to say it. The problem that Jeremiah pointed out was, it's really the pastor's fault. The problem is the leadership. If the leaders, watch this, if the leaders of the people would just turn back to Torah, the majority of the people would turn back also. The reason why a lot of people right now will not worship on the Shabbat is because they ask their pastor. And their pastor said, oh no, I mean, that was for the Jews. They don't know why they always laugh when they get caught up in a something, you know, they always gonna chuckle. That was for the Jews. we Christians now, ain't we? I mean, you know. And you say, hey, but was that something that Yah did, or was that something that man did? And they'll say, well, well, I mean, you know, it is tradition, but Yah honors those traditions if we're doing it for him. And they'll come up with a bunch of lies. Like we don't have to be under Yah's law. Now you're talking about a lie. And I don't want to get into that too deep because that's not my message today. I want to show you something. What I really want you to see is the leadership has a problem with Torah. And when I use the word Torah, I mean the first 5 books of the Bible, as well as the teaching and preaching of the prophets and the writers, or what we call the writings, like the books of Job and the Psalms and all that. They have a problem with that. Jeremiah later in the chapter is going to tell you why. He's going to tell you because they personally are guilty of breaking the Torah. So they have to teach a lesson or a message that excuses their behavior. And I'll get deep into this next week. But for today, I want you to see that Yah says the problem with the wayward pastor is both the deceiver and the deceived will be punished. Now I could almost see, you know, him just punishing the deceiver. You get it? The deceiver is like the devil. You know, he come up and he's smooth talking. I mean, he's slick as snail snot. You know what I'm saying? He's a deceiver. And the way he speaks to you is convincing. You know what I'm saying? The way his voice and his movements and his attributes, his attitude as he's talking, he convinces you that what he's saying is right. And so you, as the member, as a sheep, you trust that this smooth talking preacher is telling you the truth. So you almost feel like you ought to be able to go to heaven, because some people think they still going up, catch wings and go to heaven, but that's on you. The book says that heaven's coming down. We'll deal with that later. But he says, if you think you're going to stand in the judgment and blame your pastor, you have another thing coming.
That's right. That's right.
Amen.
Because as bad as y'all don't want to hear this must go out worldwide. I know you don't want to hear it, but I got to say it. You do know that not every pastor has been called by Yah. The majority of preachers and pastors today, I would say upwards of 99% of them are called by Satan. I'm talking about the devil himself. The devil went, watch this, disguised as an angel of light. Oh, y'all missed that. You don't believe he can do that, huh? If you read, I think it is 2 Corinthians chapter 11, I believe it is, it literally says that if Satan can transform himself into an angel of light, it ain't no wonder that his servants can do the same thing. That's why everybody always says this: I saw a vision, or something told me. And because you didn't try that spirit by Torah, you believed he was telling you to go preach. When really, if it was Yah, he might have been telling you to reach. Amen. Reach for me, son. He didn't say preach for me. But there's another side of that picture that I want to show you, that this is even more scary. So most of the pastors have been called by Satan. But some of these, watch this, satanic pastors, watch this, have been put in place by Yah. I know that sounds crazy, doesn't it? Ezekiel says, in I think chapter 13 and 14, that Yah would allow certain false preachers and pastors to set up shop in order to draw people who are not really his away from the assembly. That's cold. In other words, Yah says, I use them fake preachers in order to, watch this, purify my group. Because people have idols in their heart, and oftentimes they're just waiting for someone to show up on the scene that says what they want to hear. And so they just keep going from place to place until they finally find that false preacher that will preach what they want to hear. Now, Pastor, why you spend so much time on that? Because I want to show you something. In those scenarios, not only is it the pastor, but it's the people who perish. The only good news we have, Zion, is that Yah says there will be a remnant. That's why I had you underline that word. I wanted you to see it in verse 3. He says, and I will gather, he says, the remnant of my flock. The remnant is the leftovers. There's a place in town, it's called something about, they call it remnants and rolls. And when you go get carpet, most of the time, when you're getting ready to do a floor, say the size of this one, you're going to need some huge rolls of carpet. So you measure this room and you go out and get it. But it never fails that once you finish carpeting the whole room, you're going to have some pieces left. Now watch this. Normally what you do with the pieces left is if you got little corners and you got walkways and places like that, you cut those pieces and you put them in. Then there's some that is tossed out. Y'all get this? That's the remnant. The ones that got tossed. Yah says, I see them all out there, but it's just a small little group of them that they got tossed. That's my remnant. I'm going to go get them. I'm going to get the ones that nobody wanted. I'm going to get the ones that seem to be useless. I'm going to go get the ones that were overlooked. I'm going to get the ones that for some reason they were listening to these false preachers, and they were involved in this false religion, But in their soul, they knew something wasn't right. They always felt uneasy. And he says, it's those people who were bold enough to say, I might not know everything that is right, but I do know that what they're saying is wrong. He said, my remnant, I'm going to go get them. And he does something in this text that I want to do for the rest of this time I'm up here. Because really, I told y'all this is going to, I want y'all to kind of walk with me through this. He says, I'm going to give them a shepherd, or give them shepherds. But in verse 5 he says, but behold, the day come that I will rise unto David a righteous branch. Ooh, wait a minute. In seminary they teach you that the Old Testament don't have nothing to do with the New Testament. That you got to read everything for what it's worth in the page. You just graduated. Don't they teach you that crazy madness in school? And what they try to do is they try to say, anytime you take a passage out of its context, its immediate context, which in this case was Jeremiah speaking about the Babylonian captivity that was to come, they say as soon as you take it away from the context of Babylonian captivity, what you have done, this is what they say, you are now eisegeting. That's what they use in seminary. It's a big word to say you're reading into the text something that really shouldn't be in the text. They say that's your opinion. They say you've left the biblical scholarship and now you're operating in opinion. Okay, all right. Woo! I told you, I don't know how I'm going to get this message across today, but I'm going to try my best to get it across. If he says, behold, the days come that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, then we would have to ask ourselves a question. But between the preaching of Jeremiah and the Babylonian captivity, did that righteous branch show up? No. Who said no? Right. The question is, if it's in context, if he says, I'm going to raise up a righteous branch, and we've got to keep it in context, did the righteous branch show up between the preaching of Jeremiah and the Babylonian captivity? What's the answer? No. No, of course not. They ended up where? In Babylonian captivity. So do you see that obviously now Jeremiah is not only waxing prophetic, but he's speaking about something way in the future, because during the captivity, some of y'all have read this book Jeremiah with me, during Babylonian captivity, did we get a righteous king? During the whole Babylonian captivity, were there any righteous kings in Judah or Jerusalem? Talk back. Wait a minute. So, while he was preaching, there was no righteous king. When they got taken into captivity, there was no righteous king. So how can the context, unless you're going to call Jeremiah a liar, how can he predict a righteous branch in the immediate context and no righteous branch showed up? Now I'm going to get into the definition in a minute, because you're going to see something. Matter of fact, let's do it now. Let's go into it now. This word righteous is the word tzedek in Hebrew. Zadi, Dalet, Yod, Kuf. And the word Zadik is the word we use for the word righteous. But here's some other words: blameless, innocent, just. Another word for Zadik, you can use this word instead of saying righteous, you can say one that is correct or one that is right. Okay, now I want you to listen to these few words: blameless and innocent. Because I've heard Hebrew roots people and Hebrew Israelites, as well as just Hebrews say, and some Jewish people say, that this Melchizedek, this king of righteousness, is the children of Israel. They say, oh no, whenever he talks about the righteous branch or the righteous, he's talking about the Jews or the Israelites as a whole. Let me fix something quickly. Are you kidding me? Are you talking about Israel? The stiff-necked, hard-hearted, rebellious nation that even Moshe said, the only reason y'all going in the promised land is because y'all promised your forefathers, but that you are yet a stiff-necked people. Nowhere in the Bible from, watch this now, Abraham, until really to the end of the book, but Abraham to Jeremiah, have we ever seen the nation righteous? No, they do good, do bad, but the majority of the time, come on y'all, stay in the room with me. Woo! They can slip off into some idolatry so fast it make your head spin. Let me tell you how wicked they was coming out of Egypt. Moshe was up on the mountain getting the law. And when he came down with the tablets, they were stinking legged and kicking up dust under the bushes and carrying on. Y'all remember that? And had already built a golden calf. So we can't be talking about that nation, I know. You're talking about the nation that murmured so much in the wilderness about bread, that when Yah finally gave them bread from heaven, they hoarded it until their houses started stinking. Because they wouldn't trust him that every day he would bring it, like he said. You're talking about the one that said, we ain't got no leak, we want to go back to Egypt. How about when they got into the land, they started following after the gods, little g, of the Canaanites and the Amalekites and the Amorites. We've read that. Y'all, in this group, we've read it. So how can he be talking about them as a nation when right now, as a nation, he's telling them because of your disobedience, you're getting ready to go into captivity. And it's going to be a terrible captivity. Babylon was no walk in the park. He's talking about, and here's the Hebrew word, Zadik, which represents righteousness. And here's another word, that you would be, this person that he's going to raise up will be right towards Yah. Don't miss that. Not right in man's eye. Who cares? He will be right in the sight of Yah. That word Sadiq also means that not only will he be right as far as in his religious viewpoint, in his relationship with Yah, but he will be ethically correct. Now, to be ethically correct means he behaves right. Because, I mean, you can do something right and you can do it wrong. Y'all know that, right? That it's possible to be unethical even though you might be doing something right. You can do it in an unethical way. In other words, if you're trying to help somebody, you can say, well, let me help you. And then you can blow the trumpet and tell the whole city, if it wasn't for me, this person would be, you know. So the helping part was correct, but that blowing the trumpet and letting the whole city know your situation and circumstance is unethical. The Messiah, or this whoever he's talking about here, is not only going to be right towards Yah, he would be right ethically, and he would seek righteousness. In other words, y'all, he's never going to operate unjustly. Which brings in a very interesting concept. The Messiah in his first advent, in his first showing up here on the planet as a human, in human form from Miriam, do you remember that he did not destroy Rome? How many of you remember that? He didn't overthrow Rome. No. Matter of fact, he didn't even overthrow Pilate. Nor did he overthrow the local government. The priests or the Levites or the Herodians or the scribes or the Sadducees. All these people were still in place when our Hamashiach died. People look at that and say, he must not be the Messiah if he didn't overthrow those powers. But let me share something with you. His righteousness wouldn't let him do it. Why? Because he says judgment has to first begin, talk back to me, in my house. See, it's unrighteous and unethical for the Hamashiach to go out in the world and start executing judgment against the powers that be, watch this, and his own house is out of order. So before he begins to execute judgment, which is what he's going to do because he is righteous, he says, I got to first start in the household of faith. In other words, I got to start with y'all. Because if I decide to execute 1 ounce of judgment outside the house, that means everybody in the house have to die. Yeah. Because Israel, let me tell y'all something. In some instances, morally and ethically and religiously speaking, you worse than some of them folk out there. Ooh, that went out worldwide, didn't it?
Needed to.
Did I say worse?
Needed to.
Some of those people, some people outside the camp are better by nature than you are by practice.
That's true.
Did you catch that?
Yeah. All right.
One of the problems that we have, Yisrael, is we have no excuse for our unrighteousness. We were given the book. We were given the prophets, the preachers and the teachers. So therefore, this king of righteousness, he has to come and deal with his people first, and that's exactly what he did. Another thing he came to do, and we'll talk about this in a moment, he came to give his life as a ransom. I'm not going to do it today. I'm just going to give it to you for a moment. Just lay this down. He didn't come to execute judgment. He came to seek and to save that which is lost, which is he gave his life a ransom. He paid the penalty for the sins of the house of Israel and Judah. Did y'all catch that?
Right.
In other words, when he died on the cross, which is actually a cross beam on a tree, he was dying as a sacrifice for the sins of the people of Yah. It's heavy. Now, let's get back to the text. He said, I'll rise a righteous branch. This word, Zadik, we hear this word used of Noah in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. Because I want you to see that there is such thing of what is called righteous. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, very interesting passage. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, it says, now these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man. That's that word. He was righteous and perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with Yah. So whoever this branch is, he's going to show up at a time when the generation is crooked, but he's going to be straight, and he's going to walk with the Most High Yah. And of course, I've already given you the spoiler. We are talking about no one except a Hamashiach, This is a prophetic message about the Messiah to come. He will come after what's called, he will be Tzaddik. He will be righteous. There's another person in the Bible. Turn to Genesis chapter 18, verse 23, and you will see another person. His name is Melchizedek. And it's really Melchizedek. And that word is very interesting because Melech is what? King. And Tzaddik is righteous. So he is by name King of Righteous. Now we'll study, when you get into Hebrew a little deeper, you'll be able to understand that when you put the word together like it is in Hebrew, they add a wa or va, which makes it personal. So it would be my righteous king. So Melchizedek really is my righteous king. Now that's interesting because Abraham, who is the father of our faith, he actually pays tithes of all he has to this king whose name is King of Righteousness, and he's from a place called Salem. Now, do y'all know that the word Salem is from the Hebrew word, talk back, Salam, which is, what's the word? Peace in English, yes. So watch this. In order to get a picture of who this righteous branch is, we first need to look at a couple of righteous men that carried this title. One of them is Melchizedek. Real quick, turn to Hebrews in the New Testament. I don't like to use that word, but just for now. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 7. Hebrews chapter 7. And we're going to really see something here, which is beautiful. Watch this. For Melchizedek, king of Salem, there it is, priest, so he's king and priest, he's king of Salem, and priest of the Most High Yah, the Elohim, who met Abraham returning from slaughter of the kings, blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all. You'll find that, as I said, in Genesis. He says, gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation. Now he gives you the name. See, y'all thought I was like studying real deep. No, all I gotta do is read. This ain't no something, it's right on the surface. Some of this stuff, you don't need a shovel. You don't need a spade. You just need a rake. Just go out there and it's right on the surface. What is his name interpreted as? King of Righteousness, Melchizedek. And after that also, he's what? King of, which is what? That is that word. Y'all thought I was so deep in Hebrew. I just read the Bible. But you see how when you've been blinded through religion, right? And you don't study Hebrew, you don't know that the word Tzaddik is righteous, and that Shalom is peace, and that we are seeing now, watch this now, we are seeing a picture here of a person who is mysterious, because his name means my king of righteousness, and he's the king, he's a priest of Yah, but he's also the king of Salem. And we don't know much about him. Verse 3, he ain't got no daddy on record. We don't know who his father is. He said, without mother, we don't know who Melchizedek mother is or daddy. It's in the Bible. He says, without having descent, we don't know who his children are. Having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of Yah, abideth a priest continually. Wait, huh? Yeah, the information that's left off about him is left off on purpose so that he can then fulfill the type of our Hamashiach. Now, consider how great this man was. Let's see if he was a good man. Whom even the patriarch Abraham, wait a minute. Abraham gave the 10th of the spoils. Wait a minute. Let's see how great he is. Let's see if this man is just popped on the scene and walked off, or whether or not this dude, whoever this Melchizedek is, this Melech, let's see how great he is. And when you start looking at the text, it says, he's so great, Abraham gave him a tithe. Hold on. Abraham, the father of the faith, gave this guy 10% of all he had. If we had time to keep going, we would discover that our Hamashiach, when he takes the priesthood, he takes it after the order of Melchizedek, because he's greater than Abraham and he's greater than Levi. Jeremiah saw someone greater than Noah, greater than Melchizedek, and greater than Levi. He said he will be a righteous branch. Now go back with me real quick. I know I'm pressing on your patience right now, but I want you to see something else. Go back to that Jeremiah passage. Verse 23 says, and I'll rise unto David. Watch this. A righteous, now here's another word, branch. Now here's something very interesting. A righteous branch. Oftentimes, when we study Hebrew, or you study the Bible, you will notice that a lot of biblical writings, teachings, are agricultural based. Branch is an agricultural term. Sima. Y'all say Sima. Sima. And I think it's going to come up on the board real quick. And you'll see that its very root means a sprout or a growth. And in context, Jeremiah sees something. He says, I can see a sprout coming up. I see it coming, not just from any place, but I see David producing a branch. The word has to do with a future ruler, and the figure means he's from David's tree. Now we also use that term, you know, when we say, do you have your family tree? No, not that one. Have y'all ever heard that term, family tree? And what you normally do is you go back as far as you can go, and you say, these parents here are the patriarch and matriarch of our family. And then they show, now for us who are in slavery here in America, we only take it back to slaves, which is so sad. When you write your family tree, it starts off in America. Y'all know good and well you didn't start here. You didn't. But that's what you put on your t-shirt. And most of the time you have a white man somewhere in there and a black man, and yeah, there it is. Okay, it's going to be, type in root from a chopped down olive tree, because that's where I'm going. Now watch this. David is known to be a righteous king. Whether or not you all like David or not, it ain't the issue. He didn't do everything right, but he's considered in the text to be a righteous king. Why is he righteous? Can anybody answer that in the room?
Man after God's own heart.
He was a man after Yah's own heart, but why was he a man after Yah's own heart?
We established Torah.
Who said that?
Me.
What he was doing was re-establishing the Torah. Remember the first king they had, or we had, was Saul. Saul started off with so much potential, but some kind of ways Saul started going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And in his last days, he went and visited a witch and called up, that's a good one. They got another one with an old, big old tree. He went to see a witch to call up old man Samuel, the prophet. And Yah said, oh man, this Hebrew gotta go. And so when David showed up on the scene, David loved the Torah. He loved Yah and he loved the law. In that first psalm, he says, blessed is the man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the ungodly, and stand in the way of sinners, and sit and see the scornful. But he says, but his delight is in the law of Yahuwah. That's Torah. The longest psalm in the song book is Psalm 119. And he takes the Hebrew alphabet, and he takes every letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and he then takes 8 stanzas, and he makes one complete psalm using the alphabet to begin each letter of the stanza. You're talking about somebody who loved Yah. It's a beautiful song. All celebrating the laws of Yah. That's what made him righteous. Not because he was perfect, but because he kept Yah's righteousness in the law. Okay, so after David, what did we get? Solomon, who started off right, but got old and tripped out. Then his son, Solomon's son, Rehoboam, tripped out. And then we can go on and on and on. Got a few good ones, a few bad ones. By the time Jeremiah gets here, we are in a slew of bad kings. So he makes a promise. He makes a promise. Yeah, that's a good one. You see the sprout coming out? All right. So you're going to see here that, and I'm going to close it down now. Jeremiah is going to use a figure of speech about a branch. And here's the picture. He says, Israel and Judah, which is the house of Israel, the whole house, will be cut down to the ground. It'll be a stump. Who's going to cut it? Hold on, folks. The Assyrians cut Israel to a stump. And then the Babylonians came and cut Judah down to a stump. Y'all know what a stump is, right? That's a good one too. A stump is just, when you cut a tree down, is that part at the base where you can't get the saw no closer to the ground. That's called a stump. And normally you cut the tree down because it's in the way. Here Yah says, judgment is coming upon the house of Israel, and guess what I'm about to do? I'm about to allow the nations to cut you down to nothing, so that when the nations pass by, all they will see is a stump. And when they look at that stump, they'll just keep going because they say, it ain't nothing but a stump. Say, but the people who used to see, say, boy, but you should have saw it when it was a full-grown tree. You should have saw it in its glory. You should have seen how many olives was on it. You should have seen how deep green the leaves were. You should have seen how many times people had picnics under its shade and under its branches. And people be bragging on the tree. And you come along later and go, but I don't see nothing now but a stump.
Right.
And y'all say, don't worry about it. He says, why? He says, because do you know that the olive trees that are indigenous, native of Israel, have a very unique characteristic. And that characteristic is, if you cut the tree down to the stump, oftentimes the stump itself will regenerate. Just the stump. and put forth a shoot and create a whole nother tree. You cannot kill the tree unless you dig up the whole stump. Let me shut it down. The Messiah says, Jeremiah says, I see Yisrael being cut down to a stump. And I can see now the nations are just going to be passing over this stump because it's nothing there. He says, but I can see in the stump a tender plant starting to grow. What do you mean a tender plant? Yeah, I can see a little shoot coming out. You mean out that gray, dead, old, raggedy stump? Man, we was about to burn that stump out the grass. Oh, no. There's a shoot coming out. A little green sprout coming out of the root system. It's coming out the base. And he says, that branch that's coming out, he said, that branch will be the king. Wait, huh? Yeah. Yep. See, David has a whole lot of kids, and all of his children didn't turn out so good. And you wonder, is there ever going to be a righteous king like David? And everybody says, well, Josiah did good, but he didn't actually become as righteous as David. Is there going to be anybody like David ever again to sit up on the throne and rule Israel? Jeremiah says, yes. Say, well, where's he coming from? A stump. Now watch this. Isaiah said he's a root out of dry ground. It's a very interesting translation. It's not really, he's really the sprout that comes from the base of the dry ground, because Israel looks totally uninhabited with its trees all sawed off. But now Yah's going to give a ray of hope when you look at an olive stump and there's just one branch growing out of that stump. And hallelujah, that branch. And we'll pick it up here next week, because I got some shouting to do next week. But that branch, he ain't no fly-by-night, any old kind of branch. This is not some little branch that's going to show up and be here today and be picked off by the birds tomorrow. No. This branch that's coming from David, this particular branch, he will be absolutely righteous. He will be absolutely in control. He will be absolutely blameless. He will be absolutely innocent. And he will rule the nations, and all of the nations will have to bow down to him. And he'll be king. Say, oh, you mean king of Israel? Yeah, no, not just Israel. He's going to be king of the world. Say, wait, you mean the no. Watch the language. He will be king of kings. That means take all the kings in the world, they're going to have to bow down to him. He'll be their king. Take all the rulers of the world. He'll be the ruler of all the rulers. Take all the masters of the world. This righteous branch is going to be the master, I'm trying to tell you this, of all the masters. And there will be no end to his reign. Now may I say this? When he came the first time, his people were but a stump. Y'all know that, right? pushed into the ghettos and the slums of Palestine, ran out of the high places and the fruitful places by the Herodians and the Sadducees and the scribes, Pharisees, and the Roman officials. And when he came, a lot of them didn't even know who he was. When he came to Israel, Israel was an afterthought in the human experience and in globalization. Israel, what are you talking about? That little raggedy nation that's over there somewhere in what we call today Palestine, but in that day in the land of Canaan. Are you serious? Who are they? But he grew up there as a root out of dry ground, as a branch from a stump. Y'all know what ended up happening, right? He was the righteous branch. But he didn't come to rule the first time. He came to give his life a ransom. How did he die? Did he die by being stoned? Did he die by being pushed off of a cliff? Did he die by drowning in the Sea of Galilee? But he died where? On a tree. As our branch. He's identifying himself with the children of Israel and the tree, watch this, that would ultimately be used in order to settle the debt with the Father. Woo. He's the righteous branch, hanging and dying for the unrighteous. He's the righteous branch, bleeding for the unrighteous. He's the righteous branch, willing to be cut off if it meant that some of us could be grafted in. He's the branch of Yah. Y'all get it? He didn't come to rule with a rod of iron. He came to make a way of salvation for his people. Now wait. He dies on the cross, right? On that crossbeam, on that tree, as our branch. But guess what they did? Buried him. So what do you think is going to happen? I just told you that if you don't cut the thing off and burn up the root, it's going to sprout back up again. There's something very powerful about this. He said of himself, now he's using agricultural terms again, he says, if you take a seed and you leave it on the counter, it'll just sit there. But if you bury it, cover it, he said it won't be long. He said, man, put me in the ground and watch what happens. In 3 days, I'll do something. I'll rise again. This time he uses another agricultural expression. He says to him about himself, he says, I'm the vine. Remember that? Now, I know y'all didn't grow up in the country, so you don't know anything about grapevines. Y'all grew up in the city. That's fine. But a grapevine is a very interesting plant because we don't think of a grapevine as root system, a trunk, and a tree. We think of everything that comes out the ground as the vine. But what happens really in a grapevine is that that stump that comes up is like the trunk of the tree. Now watch this. And the first branch that breaks off is the main branch, but they call that the vine. It's still a branch though, but they call it the vine because it's the main source of nutrients to the actual grapevines that go out. Remember when he says to his disciples, he says, I am the vine. And watch, he said, you are the branches. Which means if you claim to follow this king, you have to be doing everything he did and acting just like him and being why? Because he's the one pushing the nutrients to you to live. So if he didn't have Baal once a year, a Baal festival where he bowed down with Christmas trees and Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, then he didn't push that to you. If he kept the Shabbat, then you keep the Shabbat. Y'all get it? If he kept Yah's commandments, he's the branch. And he says, now, every branch in me that don't bear fruit is getting cut off. Only people in agriculture understand that term. There's two things having to do with cut off. He says, one, the person who's working grapes, if they see a branch, and let's say it's fallen on the ground, they have one or two choices. If it's not producing, look, he's back there knowing what I'm going to say already. They lift up the vine, don't they? They'll lift up the vine and then tie it. Because they say, well, maybe the reason why, you don't know about this, Green. They say, maybe the reason why it didn't produce like it should is because it's under dirt, because it's on the ground. So the farmer has a choice, he says, I can lift it up. That's one term. Hallelujah for those of us who just fell on the ground and Yah came by as the great husbandman and said, I'm not finna come, I'm just gonna lift them up. Maybe get them closer to the sunshine. They may do better. But then there's that second group that you can look at, and it don't matter how much you lift them up. The vine is rotten. What do you have to do then? If that branch is rotten, somebody else been in the field beside me, then you got to cut it off. So there's two things going on. There's the lifting of some, and there's the cutting off of others. And guess who the righteous branch is? It's none other than our Hamashiach. This is where I'm going to start next week, because I want to show you something. Israel, once again, is a stump. Once again, if you look at the children of Israel worldwide, stump. We're not the beautiful, fruitful blossom tree that we're supposed to be. As a nation, people look at us and just walk by like we ain't even there. Just a little stump. Lagging and sagging. Just a stump. Smoking weed and drinking red Kool-Aid. Just a stump. Last high, first five. Just as, to the world, the nation just looked like bad situation. Michael Phelps won 23 medals. I think he's up to 25 now. They've been filming him almost nonstop. Black girl, a Hebrew Israelite girl, got in that pool and got first place. And the television camera didn't even cover her medal ceremony. Why? This stump. This is a little stump. Where I show that for? It ain't gonna be long, y'all. See, what they don't know is that our branch, our king, he's still alive. And he's coming back to restore us again unto our glory. We haven't seen it yet, but we're starting to see it now. So I'm just going to shut it down right here. Thank you all for being patient. I told you it was going to be an interesting message, but it was mainly informational. I pray that it blessed you on this Shabbat. Shalom.